The thing about being a bestseller versus being an award winner is you can't game it. You can get enough books sold. Your book could be crap, and you could get enough books bought and get onto some of these lists. It's just how much you can sell. An award like this, you have to go through a panel. I knew this was an award-winning book, and I just owned it and I felt it, and then it came to be. Everything you need will present itself to you if you're on the quest. If you're, as he said, following your bliss.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Andrew Daniel with us. Andrew is an award-winning author, spiritual teacher, and director at the Center for Cinesomatic Development. He's the founder of Cinesomatics, a feeling-based therapy utilizing video feedback and movement to assess and resolve stuck somatic, psychological, and emotional patterns. This work is held online and in person internationally from New York to London, Tuscany to Switzerland. His latest book, Awaken to Your True Self, is a gold winner in the 2022 Nautilus Book Awards. Andrew, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So I'd love to hear your origin story of how you got into this and what your awakening was, since you have a book all about awakening.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the condensed version, and if there's anything you want to dive in, you just let me know.
Okay.
Because it's a story. The gist of it is when I was young, there was a bit of a turmoil in my life. We had some issues with my biological father when I was an infant, and that led to the courts and my mom getting custody of me, and they had me when they were very young, still in high school. So very, very young parents. My stepfather came into the picture, and he sort of rescued us, kind of, moved us to the other side of the country, gave us a much better chance. However, with moving to a new school, one of the things that I had were warts. So I had warts on my fingers, and I was teased. Right, I was a new kid. I had warts on my fingers, so this set into motion a massive life trajectory, and unbeknownst to me then, but I took all of that personally, and I used that to suffer, and I used that to go into victim mentality for the first 2/3 of my life. And so from essentially first grade till essentially 12th grade, I was generally ostracized, bullied, teased, made fun of, picked last in gym class, food thrown at me during lunch, sitting alone at lunch, or at the reject table. I was tripped in the hallway with my books falling. At the time, it felt much worse than it probably was in reality, but it was still enough to lead me to feeling very depressed and near suicidal. I was very angry. I would be teenager crying myself to sleep, feeling like nobody wanted me, nobody loved me. And on top of that, because my parents were so young, there was a lot of money stuff that caused tension between my parents. And so growing up with that was another thing that I was eventually faced with overcoming, different belief systems and behaviors and ways of seeing money. And so that led me to an essential turning point when I was, I think, about 17 years old. And it was either I end this, either taking my life or going to school and taking others' lives, and just ending the pain somehow. Or I do whatever it takes to figure this out. And it probably wasn't as crystal clear then as I'm saying it. It was probably a bit muddy, but there still was this turning point of, I can't spend the rest of my life like this, not having friends, screwing up every chance I had with girls, hating myself, all of this stuff. And so, as you could guess, which option I eventually took was doing whatever it took to figure this out. And so I remember getting on my computer in this is gonna set my age, but in about around 2004, very early Google, I remember getting onto my computer, big CRT monitor, big clunky keyboard. I think it was probably still dial up. And I typed into Google, how to be cool, how to get girls to like you, how to make friends. And it didn't really produce much. But after a few years of searching, I eventually found some things that showed me, oh, there's something that you can do. Now those first things were very superficial, but they did do something. I had a friend who suggested I grow my hair out rather than cutting it real short and spiking it up, which was very popular in the early 2000s. And I did that, and I was afraid to do that. And yet the response from people around me was better. Girls found me more attractive. And I was like, oh, so you're saying I can do something different. I can change my appearance and have people respond to me different. Oh my God, I had no idea. And so that started me on a path of hope that I actually could do something to change the results of my life. Because up until then, I was living life as, you do the best with what you have, and these are the cards you're dealt, and if people don't like you, then you're just going to have to live with that. And this told me that I didn't, right? It said there's a lot more you can be doing. And then once I turned about probably 19 years old, well, 18 years old, I moved and I started a software company because during that time, I was a nerd. I liked video games, Dungeons and Dragons. I liked anime. I liked computers. And so I started web design and graphics. My cousin showed me Flash and GeoCities, if anybody knows, when I was 14 years old. And so I got into all of that stuff. And what I loved about it is that people on the internet, AOL Instant Messenger, all of this stuff, forums, IRC, people didn't know my reputation at school. They didn't even know I was 14 years old. And so it was an amazing experience because I got to interface with other nerds and geeks like myself that weren't based off of my reputation at school. Mm-hmm. And so I got along with these people on online forums, and I could interface with something, a computer, that didn't attack me, that didn't make fun of me. And so that set into motion a lot of my early career in design and programming. So at 18 years old, I started a software company. I wrote a particle effects and physics engine to create special effects for online media, games, movies, stuff like this online. And at that same time, I was learning personal growth, self-help, development, Think and Grow Rich, how to win friends and influence people, all these sort of classic things that showed me, oh, there's a whole corpus of ideas and materials I could learn that my parents had no idea about, school never taught me, the culture didn't tell me, and it was like, oh my God, I can do something about this. Like if I read enough books and I learn enough stuff and do enough differently, I'm going to get different results. And so on top of that, I was learning how to be an entrepreneur. My family was not, just regular stay-at-home mom, blue-collar dad. bless them so much. I'm so grateful. And they didn't know about entrepreneurship. They didn't know about business. They didn't know about these things. And I had no one else in my family. So I had to forge my own path. And it reminds me of in the Arthurian romances, when they went on the Grail quests, they went to find the Grail. And when they set out to adventure, they said it would be a disgrace to do it together. And so each of the knights of the Round Table went to the forest and embarked on their quest where it was the darkest for them, where it was the most untreaded. And they explored, they quested for that Grail on their own path, not a path laid by somebody else. And through the books and guidance and mentors, things like this, I had some of that guidance, but I was forging my own path. And I was just literally figuring it out. When I was writing my software, I literally had to invent my own algorithms to do what I wanted to do. There's probably some invented somewhere else. I just had no idea about it. So I had to create the licensing platform to create the serial numbers and email. And I'm just like hodgepodging this, duct tape and paper clips and super gluing this through code, learning as I went.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically just learned things as I needed them, rather than spending 8 years at university learning it before I needed it, which I couldn't afford anyway. So I was forced economically to do this. It wasn't like, hey, I want to do this alone. I want to not have any guidance. I just didn't. And so my background of being alone as a kid, I was an only child for 12 years until my siblings were born. So I spent a lot of time by myself, didn't have a lot of friends, a few here and there, but for the most part, not a lot. So I knew what it was like to be on my own, to play on my own, to have the people around you not understand you, right? This black sheep. My dad worked for the gas company. He has no idea about software and passive income or any of this. And so from all of my life experiences leading up to then, this really set fertile ground for entrepreneurship. And so I ran that software company for about 7 years. I wrote 2 versions of that software. We had Fortune 100 clients. So it was about 30,000 people downloaded it. So it was pretty cool for an 18, 19, 20-year-old. And I still had no idea what I was doing. But that set me on the entrepreneurial path, plus the personal development path, because they kind of went together. It's like, well, I don't know about this. Well, I have to change my beliefs. I have to learn new things for myself in order to run this business. So I found that the personal development and entrepreneurship journey was very intertwined. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I was also wanting to date girls, women, and that desire was there too. So I was also learning, well, how do you talk to girls? How do you do all the dating and relationship and sexuality stuff? And so all of the curses, the flaws of my childhood laid all of the fertile ground to learn, to transform, to heal as an adult. And then I got into different trainings around personal development and transformation, therapies, healings. And then as I continued that journey, I was about 21, and in my 20s, I was really introduced to healing. So not just self-help and personal development where you're learning and growing. This was more about healing. It revealed that it wasn't just I didn't know how to be confident. It revealed that there was a lot of stuff in my past that caused me to be insecure. And so it was this very different reframe of, oh, it's not just the pickup lines I use, right? It's not just the sales tactics that I have. It's not just learning how to, do better copy. there's insecurities. There's actual things inside of me, these emotions, these belief systems that need to be healed. Those are having a much bigger effect than just, changing my outfit or speaking differently. So that set me on a journey of many different healing modalities, pretty much all of them that were available, from regular talk therapy to coaches to very few, but some psychedelics, to spirituality. I was learning meditation, mindfulness, alternative medicine. And that was another benefit, that growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. So we didn't go to all the fancy doctors and psychiatrists and all of that stuff, which for me was a blessing, because I personally am more of alternative medicine, holistic, natural approach than pharmaceuticals. That's just my approach. And so that to me ended up being a blessing. And so all of that kind of coalesced, all of that came together to the ending of my software company. When the iPhone came out, it kind of wrecked my industry, which was kind of okay, because at that point I was much more interested in transformation and coaching and the healing arts and everything. And so then that started my journey of, how do I make transformation my business? How do I now take all of the healing and lessons and wisdom and transformations that I've learned and help other people? And so that set me on just a 10-year journey of trying to figure that out. Software was really easy. Very clear call to action, very clear value, tangible, it's right there. And it's not me. But now it's me. I'm facilitating. I'm with people. And who's going to hire a 25-year-old to teach them about sex? Who's going to hire a 25-year-old to help them heal about their life issues? And so I had a lot of things working against me. And there was still a lot that I had to learn and overcome in myself to be able to be functional in that business. So that was a 10-year journey. And during that 10 years, I was homeless twice. I was published by a major online transformational company. And then 3 months later, I was homeless. And I was learning these secrets to the universe. I was having all this awareness, all this healing. And yet, I was sleeping in my car, and I had to transfer pennies, 73 cents, from one bank account to another in order to afford a can of soup a night to eat. And during that time, I lugged my giant iMac into the public library in Costa Mesa, plugged it in, and every day I was working on a video launch sequence and all of this stuff, which in my mind, I was doing whatever it took. But in reality, I was just in complete denial. I was just so caught up in ego. I could not get a job. I applied for jobs, and they're like, "Oh, so you want to be a waiter at 26 years old? What experience do you have? Oh, you have none. Oh, I see in your resume there's nothing here for the past 6 years. What have you been doing? Oh, I wrote a software program and I ran a software company." They're like, no. And so I couldn't even get these minimum wage, jobs to do it. I was overqualified and underqualified at the same time. And so it was just a shit show. And so as I was doing this and struggling, eventually what I came about through the help of a mentor was that I had all of this wisdom up in my head. I knew all of these things up here. But in my body, they were missing. My body told a different story. The embodiment, the actual manifestation and realization of that wisdom, of that knowledge, was not in my body. And so I couldn't access it in my real life. And so that ended up being one of the biggest breakthroughs, was that you can learn all of this stuff in the books. You can preach all of this stuff. You can have all of this stuff up inside. But if it's not in your body, you're not able to take congruent action from that, then it's not going to have the effect that you think. And so being able to see literally in my own body how when I moved my hand, when I moved my body, when I walked, when I interacted with other people, seeing that and seeing how I was passive aggressive, I was narcissistic, I was ran by ego, I was terrified, I was insecure, I was passive aggressive, I was manipulating, I was doing all of this, what I would call shadow material. I had all this shadow material running. And I had no idea, because I just spent 5 years learning positive psychology to spin that differently, to tell better stories, to put a mask over that, to fake it till I made it kind of thing. And so it wasn't until I was able to see that stuff in myself, for myself, that I could make that change. And so that put me on another 5-year journey of awakening. And by awakening, I really mean waking up out of my illusions, out of my fantasies, waking up to, yes, a more spiritual truth, a greater spiritual reality, and a much more tangible, practical reality that I was in complete denial of. And so the awakening process wasn't just understanding, right, that we're all connected, that there's something beyond our ego. There's a lot of spiritual realizations that I woke up to. But the most profound were the ones that showed my distortions of reality, that I was so far from truth in how I saw myself in the world and the universe that it was creating tremendous suffering in my life, all the way back to the stories about being a victim when I was a kid, being made fun of, and realizing my part I played in all of that. And so as I spent those years transforming and healing and breaking through that and actually transforming my body to ground and embody more feeling rather than heady escape thinking, everything in my life changed. And so everything started working. And then that led me to crash, bang. That led me to writing this book, Awaken to Your True Self, which you mentioned in the beginning, where I put in all of the biggest lessons that I learned that made the difference between all of the self-help I did for 10 years and the things that actually broke me through. So all of the things that I learned after all the self-help work of the awakening, of embodiment, of not being a victim, of the narcissism, of all of that stuff, I wrote in this book. And after I wrote that book, I published it, and it won the Gold Award of the Nautilus Book Awards in 2022. And then my business took off, and it's helped tens of thousands of people. And I started doing workshops and events and working with clients for the past few years. And that's where I'm at now.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your success and on the transformation that you went through, the incredible journey. Do you think that you chose your biological father, and that you guys chose each other before you incarnated?
I would imagine there's no accidents. I think that from what I've seen, I have no evidence or anything, but it's very clear to me that, not even from my own life, but working with clients, is that there's no accidents.
Mhm.
Yeah, even the warts, all of that stuff set into motion. Because I look back and I think, all right, if that didn't happen, what would my life have looked like staying on that side of the family? And I actually had a chance when I was an adult because we had no communication. I've only talked with him once as an adult. Just complete cut ties. And I was very glad and blessed to have had the path that I had.
So when you say you cut ties, is that on your side or is that mutual, or is this something you want to
I
work
was,
on?
I was 3 years old and there was abuse and violence.
Yeah.
And so literally my mom had custody and he was not treating her well. And there was like mafia and I mean, it was like crazy stuff.
Mm.
And so we literally moved back to where my stepfather, my dad grew up. So
Right. And you said you had
not my
one
choice.
contact with him in your adulthood. Was that something that you
Yes.
initiated or he initiated?
Um, well, I guess my half siblings, his daughters, found me on MySpace when I was 18 years old.
Mm.
And they were like teenagers. They were like 13 years old. And I was just starting my software company. And I was like, this is too much. Like I barely have a good relationship with our own family right now. I was just not ready to re-engage with all of that. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm learning how to do a business. I wasn't able to do it. And so I kind of ignored that until I was maybe in my mid 20s. And I said, you know what? I've been doing some healing work. I would probably regret never at least just saying something. And so I reached out, I got his number, I called him. We talked for 20 minutes. It was like the most awkward conversation ever. Hi, I'm kind of your child and never talked to you in 20 years. And we had pretty much nothing in common. Um, and it was really just like talking to a stranger
Yeah.
that happened to be a biological father. So he was nice. He was fine. I really appreciated him having the call. I had the call. It created it just kind of closure, just a touch point of, all right, I did this. It's not running me. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not hiding from anything. I did it. Um, it was okay. How do I feel? I feel fine. Doesn't really change much. Okay, great. On with my life.
Mm. Yeah. I had a foster father who was an alcoholic, and we didn't get along. But in retrospect, now I see the perfection of all of it, including him. And I understand that this was for my highest and best good. And one of the books that really, I don't know, helped to crystallize this for me is a children's book, actually, by Neil Donald Walsh called The Little Soul in the Sun. Have you heard of it or have you read it?
Yeah, well, conversations with God.
Yeah, it's based on conversations with God. That's right. Yeah. So if everyone is in your movie to assist you in some way, and it's all just kind of like a big positive conspiracy, but we all forget
Yeah,
who we are. We're
yeah,
so embedded into the video game that we forget who we truly are. And we're just playing these roles, and some have to be
yeah,
villains in order to give us somebody to forgive so that we can experience ourselves as being forgiving. And it's hard. It's really, really
yeah,
hard, but it's part of our path.
yeah. I found all these different sort of even conflicting spiritual philosophies. Able to reconcile them and use a lot of them. And the thing that helped me with this one is more of the Hindu teaching of the world's a play. This is all a play.
Yeah.
play in both meanings, as in a giant movie, and we're playing, right? We're, and then you think, right, okay, even Christianity, we're children of God. Well, what do children do? Children play. And we're in a play. And you understand that everything is meaningless and everything is the most important thing, right? It's this combination of, we are a speck on a speck in the speckles of a galaxy in the infinite universe. I mean, we are absolutely nothing. And yet we are also the most important thing, the leading edge of the Big Bang, of creation. We are literally the most important point of consciousness in all of history, because we're here and it's now. And so understanding that both, there's another saying, I guess, is that be noble, for you are made of the stars. Be humble, for you are made of the earth. Mm. And that torsion, right? That sort of constant flux between these two of the yin and yang, I found really help ground me into reality, both a spiritual reality and a material reality, which are the same thing.
Yeah, it's a balance. It's a balance because you have to be in both worlds simultaneously, in the physical and in the spiritual upper worlds at the same time, and not forgetting your connection with God, but still paying the bills and handling conflicts and difficult people and treating them as emissaries, representatives of God, because we're all messengers
and
of
then
him.
Exactly. And it's also at the same time of there's still, I find it best to say it's duality in the context of oneness. So yes, you understand we're all God, we're all children of God, however you want to see it. And there's still people doing evil things. And there's still things that you can stop and say no to. And so it's not living in a fantasy land. It's being in the reality that consciousness has free will. Consciousness can do evil things, but consciousness also comes in and stops those things and has boundaries and love and protect, right? So we have the ability to harm, to kill, to hurt, to abuse, and we have the ability to not do those things and to stop those things. So it took me a long time to really kind of bring these things together that seem like paradoxes. Like, wait a minute, there's non-duality, right? So you understand it's non-dual, which there's no good or bad, there just is. And at the same time, there's still very clear differences between things that work, that are loving, and things that are evil and don't work. And so how do you reconcile that? And I mean, that's part of the awakening. That's part of that process of, it's not an either or, it's a yes and. Because if you are only up in the upper, ascended kind of ways, you're naive. You're disconnected from reality, like I was. And that's where I was. That's when I said I wasn't in my body. The stuff wasn't embodied. And so you become dangerous.
Yeah, it's like spiritual bypassing. You're
exactly.
You're not really here. You're not available for people who need you because you're up in the clouds and in some fantasy world.
Exactly. And people don't realize it makes you dangerous because you're not seeing the shadow. You have to see the shadow, but you see the shadow for what it is. It's still an illusion, but you're in the illusion. So you have to see it and see through it. And so that's where the non-dual comes in, where you understand, oh, no, I'm not going to hate this person. I'm not going to harm myself because I'm hoodwinked by the illusion. I'm going to acknowledge this illusion so I can protect myself and those I love. and help humanity. And at the same time, I'm not going to be a victim to it. I'm not going to buy in to the lie. And so when you're able to do both, whew, I mean, there's so much peace. You can be of so much service. It's really hard to help people, as you said, when you're up in the clouds bypassing. And at the same time, when you're caught up in all the karma, when you're caught up in the cycle, when you're on that wheel of fortune going up and down, you're a victim. You're at the effect of all of life in the world. It's really hard to change the world when you're at the effect of it. So these are
blowing
all,
in the wind.
exactly. Yeah. Some people are a plastic bag in New York City.
Yeah. And now you mentioned the leading edge of creation a few minutes ago. I remember hearing that from Abraham. So I'm guessing you're familiar with Abraham Hicks.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
It's been a while, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of good stuff in that.
Yeah. So how do you reconcile the seeming paradox of duality, good and evil, and oneness? Like all that is God. It's one, and there's nothing that's independent of him.
The play part was very helpful. When you look at it as a movie, as a play, as a performance, when you are watching the best actors, you don't know. You're engaged. You think they're really the villain, or they're really the hero, or they're really the NPC, the non-player character. You're really convinced. You do such a good job, and it's entertaining and engrosses you. And you're booing him, and you want to throw tomatoes at him because he's evil. He's the bad guy. But then when the play ends, everybody comes out onto the front of the stage. Everybody holds hands, smiles, and bows, and you clap for everybody. You clap for the villain. You clap for the hero. You clap for the NPC. And so while we're here, understanding that we are in physical time and space, and we have to understand that is part of it. We cannot bypass it, right? This is a cup, and it's holding water. You have to see this. And it's also 99.9% empty space, right? So that physics coming in of saying, yeah, but there's also an atomic, and then there's even a quantum, right? This is also Schrodinger's glass kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're not actually touching the glass, because your electrons in your hand never get close enough to the electrons of the glass in order to physically touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that physics understanding, for me at least, has also helped in the spiritual understanding. And it's like, oh, it's just kind of two different paths to get to the same conclusion. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at some of the most notable scientists, they have a huge interest or belief in religion or spirituality. It's only, I mean, if you look at the history of it, the priest class and the alchemists and the scientists and the astronomers and the artists, like a Da Vinci, it was all the same thing. It was only because of the church. It was actually the church that forced the separation of the sciences and spirituality to avoid, being hung and persecution. And so it kind of backfired. And so now everything's ran by the quote unquote science, and the old models of the church no longer match that. And so we have a huge disconnect between the mythologies of the past that served for thousands of years and the hard evidence of what's in front of us. But I don't think it's the silver bullet of the atheist scientists that they think it is against spirituality. Because I think more than anything, it actually proves a lot of these ancient texts. I mean, the computers binary that makes all electronic computer systems work was based on the I Ching. So all of this stuff goes together. If you look at yin and yang, electron, proton, North Pole, South Pole, I mean, male, female, it's all in there. God's, quote unquote, God's face, God's writing. No, what is it? God's face is written upon nature. Something like this. There's some phrase like that. And if you can see, if you have the eyes to see, you can see this. So how I reconcile that is, all right, well, these seem like paradoxes. Well, I've had enough experience. The things I'm talking about are mostly not belief for me. I know them. How do I know them and not just believe in them? It's because I've experienced this. I've done this work with clients. I've done this thousands of times. And I'm able to see these spiritual truths come through in my clients in the way that they move. So we have video of people doing this stuff. I've all of this experiential evidence firsthand that these things are true, that they actually work. I see what it looks like for somebody to only believe in their ego. That doesn't work. I've seen what it looks like for people to try to ascend out of their body and live in a fantasy. It doesn't work. It's not true. And so I don't come in with theories that I try to project and force upon clients. It's emergent. The things that I teach, the Cinesomatics process that I do, is an emergent modality. It's an emergent approach, which means that all of the things that we do come from them actually working and happening for people. I discovered these somatic archetypes in people that's how it came to be. I observed this stuff happening in people. We played. I experimented. I observed. And this is what was revealed. It was revealed to me that we have certain definitions in our mind, and then our body has its own definition of these things. And when they're out of relationship, when they're different, that person always, 100% of the time, struggles with that in their life. So how I reconcile these paradoxes is understanding that every single paradox that I've experienced and came across, that's where the power is. Mm-hmm. The power is in the paradox. Most people want to dissolve and eliminate that conflict of the paradox. They want to fix the paradox. They want to resolve it. No. It's the opposite. You stay in the paradox. That's where the power is. The power is in the impossibility that meets at the paradox. And you find that, that's actually true.
Yeah, well, an example of that, I think people are opening up to a little bit more these days, but it's still, it's a big stretch for most people, this concept of an NPC, that there are people who are non-player characters, like in a video game, who are consciousness, but they are not regular souls in the traditional context of, we're a bunch of souls reincarnating in these plays and these movies time and time again. But most of the people that fill our movie, our play, our simulation are NPCs. They fill the set as extras, essentially. And that's really hard for most people to wrap their heads around. So they dismiss it. And I'm curious to hear, how did you come to this conclusion that there are NPCs in this play, in this movie or video game?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I've taken it to as far as you've taken it. I haven't really. It's like there's a lot of things that seem like the most plausible things, right? Elon Musk talks about, is most likely a simulation. You look at graphics, computer graphics, all this stuff, and then you think about AI and these computer graphics, and it's like, what is real anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is actually real and what is not? Then you go into how your nervous system translates what you see, and that things start getting really wonky there. And then you go into symbolism. Then you go into the dream world. We do a lot of work around dreams and lucid shamanism, and you're like, well, this is reality is not what we're told it is. There is something here. I can't necessarily define it, but I've had enough experiences that this is more than just like, if this is a hallucination, so is all of that stuff. And so for me, the NPC idea has more so came from people that just, like, there's nobody home. Like, they're just going through life. It's kind of like a more advanced, sheep kind of archetype. And I'm very careful to not go into like a superiority in ego thing, because it's very easy to say, oh, well, all you sheep, you're all asleep. That's not what I'm saying. It's more of the Matrix metaphor of these people are just plugged in. They're so helplessly inured by the system, they're going to fight to defend it. And they just don't realize they're in the Matrix. Are they a real body plugged into there? Yeah. But as far as their life goes, they're not present. They're not really showing up. They're just kind of on autopilot. It's like there's a movie with Ryan Reynolds, Free Guy.
That was a funny movie.
So you saw it. So it was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And there's also another movie called The Lego Movie, which was a lot better than I thought it would be, which is like the Matrix with Legos, and masonry, and all. There's so much in that movie. But these talk about people that are essentially NPCs, people that are just going on the script, and then something happens and they wake up out of it. And so I haven't came necessarily as far to the conclusion that they're actually not real people. I think maybe they are, but they just haven't, like, that program hasn't engaged in them. Like they just haven't, they're just so living on autopilot like I was, that they're not really they're not, it's not that they don't have an effect on the world, but it's, because every single person, every single thing makes this world this world. It wouldn't be that, like, I wouldn't be who I am 100% if it weren't for you, if it weren't for the barista, if it weren't for what's happening in Somalia or whatever. So everything has a part. Everything is valuable. Everything is there. So it's really important to not devalue that.
Yeah.
And it's also important to okay, so this is what it is. For me, it brings in compassion, because I've gone down the spiritual elitist route of being like, oh, I know that we're in a matrix. I know all this stuff. You don't. Oh, you silly little peon. You're clueless. You're ran by the system. Meanwhile, there's some banker that's running me, right? Where he's got his puppet strings on me. And so I eventually realized that the only way that this could serve is through compassion, of understanding, oh, Jesus was on the cross. So I'm not one particular religion. I grew up Catholic, but I've studied many of them, and I pull from a lot of different ones. And so Jesus was on the cross, and he said many, many freaking powerful stuff. One of them was, Father, forgive them, for they do not know. And so there's people that can use that out of superiority and arrogance, and I've done that. But I do my best to really find that compassion of, all right, these people are committing atrocities. Some of them know, but a lot of people just don't know. They're born into pain. They're born into suffering. They're born into abuse. If all you know in your life is abuse, have you really made a choice to be abusive? So I personally feel that there are different levels of, I guess, accountability. Is that someone who, quote unquote, knows better and makes a choice is held to more of a level of accountability than someone that really doesn't. That's literally just born. Like if you look at some of these tribalistic places in these third world countries, you literally see children from birth learning how to be terrorists. I mean, they just don't know any different. They literally, their parents are gods to them, and we just learn this stuff. So understanding that most of us really just don't know. And there's somewhere, there's someone somewhere, or something somewhere, or him somewhere, whatever, that's looking at me and saying, forgive him for he does not know. Right? So I hope that that same grace is afforded to me in my blind spots, in my limitations, in my weaknesses, that I try to afford the world. And I find that that serves a lot more than going into everybody's a hallucination for me. That's true. It is true. But you have to understand that in the context of everyone's God. We're all the same thing. We're each a drop in the ocean. And when one drop of the ocean attacks another drop in the ocean, it's just the ocean attacking itself. And then that's when you get cancer. Then that's when you have problems. And that's when stuff doesn't work. So
yeah, we're all equally important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're all at different ripenesses on the tree, right? Of fruit. You know, we're all different parts of our own paths, and it all plays into each other. We all need each other. And it's like you can't have a victor without a loser. It just doesn't work. You can't have a hero without a villain or a conflict or a trial or a shadow or a dragon. And so we need those dragons as much as they need us.
Yeah. We need the contrast in order to appreciate
exactly.
the sun on a sunny day. We need to have the rain. We need to have inclement weather.
And all of it serves.
Yeah.
This was another lesson I learned, that even the stuff that doesn't serve, right? Even if the rainy day cancels your game, or the person breaks up with you, or whatever it is, even if you're dysfunctional, even if you're, messing things up, even if you're not able to get things to work, it all still serves, right? You're still learning from it. There's always something there. So understanding all of this kind of thing, it really, if done correctly, it should lead to peace. It leads out of suffering into peace. If you do it incorrectly, it leads to nihilism, right? It just leads to, well, the best route is just suicide, right? Someone has a quote where it's like, the only real question in life is either do you kill yourself or not. That's a certain way of thinking. That's a certain way of relating to life and consciousness. And some work, some don't.
Yeah. I think you're into Alan Watts and his teachings. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm actually an advisor for the Alan Watts organization. So I work with his son, Mark, the past few years.
That's awesome. Well, what are some of his most profound teachings from your standpoint?
Oh, this is a part 2 call right there. But yeah, so Alan Watts and Joseph Campbell have both, which awesomely enough, both organizations have endorsed my book, which is really special because I acknowledge Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts and my other mentor in the book. So it's very special that both places have respected and endorsed what I'm doing. So that's very rewarding. But as far as some of Alan Watts' profound teachings, the first one that comes to my mind, just because I like the way it sounds, is talking about this feeling of getting plopped onto the earth, Right? I think a lot of people that have felt like black sheeps, or we are maybe more plugged in, more tuned in. It kind of feels like the aliens stopped here for a pit stop, and they left while we were still in the bathroom. um, and we're just kind of dropped off here in this strange world where people are killing each other and fighting over insane stuff. And like it's just like, wow. I'm not from this place. This is crazy. Or people don't understand us. So there's a lot of things, even in the womb and at birth and in childhood, that can foster these feelings. But what Alan Watts talks about, he says that you didn't come into the earth, you came out of the earth, right? He says, just as an apple tree apples, the earth peoples. And whatever spiritual ideas of being made by God or the Anunnaki or whatever spectrum of origin story you have, this is very helpful to a lot of people, of understanding that if you believe that you were plopped down onto this strange planet, you're going to live a very different life. You're going to relate to the world, to yourself and others in a very different way than if you realized you came out of the earth, right? That you're a part of this place, that you're not a stranger here, that you're of it. And that distinction I've seen and I've applied with clients in the cinesomatic work. So people that would come in as if they were an alien plopped down here, they walk around the space, lost, afraid, confused, pulling back. Everything's a threat. They literally look like they're walking through a foreign land. And so when I get them to shift that into saying you came out of the earth, you're from the earth, right? You're peopled by the earth. That whole relationship changes. And well, why would you want to change that? What was the point of that? Well, imagine going through life as if everything's a threat, everything is foreign, you don't understand things, you're lost. Just practically think about what sort of results you'll encounter in your life from that perspective, versus as if this was home and it was safe and you trusted it and it brought you forth and you had a relationship with the land rather than being foreign into it. What kind of results in your life might you encounter during that path? I can guarantee you 100% that the second path is going to be more functional. You're going to be able to perform more functionally, more healthy, more in accord, more in ecology that way than the other way. The other way leads to a lot of the Western thinking of man versus nature. Man has to conquer nature. Man has to separate himself from nature. Laws, machines versus nature. All of these sort of conflicts arise, I think, not only from that, but that plays a part in, do we come from this place or do we just plopped into it and we have to fight our way through it? Fighting your way through life versus being supported by life are two very, very different life paths. And I've seen the difference in people, and it's night and day. So that's one of the ones that first come to mind that I see actually validated in my work with clients.
Gotcha. How did you end up being on that board for the Alan Watts organization?
Long story short of it was, with my last mentor, I was, it was a small business, but essentially a CTO kind of position. I was just involved running all of the technology and systems from my experience in the past. And so one of the things I was asked to do was to help with archiving of all of his analog footage and audios and digitizing them and hiring a team and managing all of that stuff. There was so here's the serendipity. So for my book, I was looking for quotes. And so if you read the book, one of my favorite parts about it are all the quotes I put in. They're not willy-nilly quotes. Each quote, I put in a lot of time and energy. They're in between specific paragraphs for specific reasons. They start each chapter for a specific reason. They hold something for me and the reader. And there was, I think I have about 3 Alan Watts quotes in here. And so I was Googling or Redditing for the accurate version of one of these quotes. And I came across a Reddit thread of one of the employees saying that we have all this archive footage and we need people to help with it. And I'm like, what? That was literally my job for in this exact role. And I did that. And so I reached out to him. I said, I literally at the highest levels worked on this. And so then I got on a call, blah, blah, blah. It led me to talk with Mark. And I basically came in and then just started there's a lot of stuff going on, and I came in and it fixed and just really got everything solid and going again. But yeah, it was literally because of this book, and I was looking for quotes, and then I serendipitously ran across that thread. I reached out, and we're doing really cool stuff. We just released a new streaming platform with remastered 4K colorized versions of old Alan Watts videos, all the talks. So
that's cool.
Yeah, really cool stuff.
I know we're out of time here, but I have one last question I'm really curious about, and that is, how did you get the Nautilus Book Award?
What do you mean?
Well, did you do something to submit for it? Was there some sort of serendipity or synchronicity that just magically brought this about? Or is there a way to, I don't know, not game it, but get on the New York Times bestseller list? There's ways that you can increase the chances that happens. I'm just curious, what, if anything, occurred on your end to help bring this award about?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing about being a bestseller versus being an award winner is you can't game it. You can get enough books sold. Your book could be crap, and you could get enough books bought and get onto some of these lists. It's just how much you can sell or how much you can buy. Whereas an award like this, you have to go through a panel. So I sent in 8 copies of my book to a panel that has been doing this for decades, and they actually read your whole book. Every person reads your whole book. You have to submit it yourself. So you submit it, you send in the books. There's a fee to help pay for the people to do this, all of this stuff. And so no way to game it at all. You don't know the people, you don't know their names, you can't get a hold of them. Like it's very legitimate. And so what I did, it was pure manifestation. It was a pure choice. I wrote out that I won the award for this book. I printed out, I made Photoshop copies of the New York Times bestseller list, put my name up there. I envisioned it. I chose it. And that's how I wrote the book. I reached not on the whole website, but in my categories, I reached #1 bestseller on Amazon in both US and UK. It's being translated to other languages. So all of that was a choice. And I chose that, and I felt it in myself. And so when when the email came that said, congratulations, you didn't just win, you won gold, I smiled, I celebrated, I called my parents and we celebrated. But I wasn't surprised, because even if they said, hey, you didn't win, I'd be like, yeah, I did. I knew this was an award-winning book, and I just owned it and I felt it. And then it came to be. So as
Mhm.
far as like manifesting how I did it, that's it. I just wrote the best book that I could write that I thought could help the most people. And I have been doing this long enough that I knew it was pretty
Yeah.
good.
But you
It's
also
not
knew to
like other
submit
books.
it for the award. And that's where manifestation can sometimes fall short. It's like, I want more checks. I want fewer bills, more checks, showing up in the,
Yeah,
but you're not actually out in the world doing things to
exactly.
bring that forward. So you can't just sit on the couch and do nothing. And you
Yeah,
submitted
you have
for
to
that.
show up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
And just like the Alan Watts thing, I was out in the world. I was engaging. I was on a quest. I was on a vision. I was on my hero's journey, and this stuff present itself. And that's one of the things I learned from Joseph Campbell is that all of these things will present themselves. Everything you need, everything. I not only believe this, I've experienced it time and time again. It is unquestionable to me. Everything you need will present itself to you if you're on the quest. If you're, as he said, following your bliss. It doesn't mean going and doing cocaine, because that what makes you feel good. Your real bliss, what really lights you up, that holy grail quest. When you're on that quest, magical aid will appear. Mountains will move when they wouldn't move before.
Yeah.
This is divine. This is the hero's journey. This is the human experience. And when you trust that, and when you go into it, and when you show up into the world, that's when all of this stuff happens. If you sit on your couch in your head thinking about it without changing anything, without making any new choices, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. It reminds me of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and how in the book it's described that the universe will conspire to bring about your personal legend, as long as you're on that quest, as long as you're journeying on this personal legend. But if you abandon it, then all bets are off.
Yeah, like the guy at the very end who didn't get the treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I actually just listened to that for the first time with my girlfriend a few months ago.
Oh, it's a
And
great audio
I was
book.
listening.
Jeremy Irons is such an incredible narrator.
Yeah, it was really good. And I'm like, yeah, this is all true. Yeah. So for me, it was kind of like a retrospective one. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like this literally just tells me everything that just happened in my life. Which I think was cool, because if I read that in the beginning of the journey, it would have seemed more fantastical, right? It would have seemed almost more of a fantasy or a fiction. But since I've lived stuff like that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a principle, that's a truth, that's a teaching. Oh wow, it's all there.
It's all magic. Yeah, amazing. All right, well, I appreciate you staying a little longer here for this interview. And if our listener is interested in reading your book or learning from you, going through your Cinesomatics modality or methodology, how do they get in touch?
AndrewDaniel.org. Very simple. AndrewDaniel.org. And then there's links to the Center for Cinesomatic Development's website. You can learn about that. You can get my book. You can get a free life map that helps you create a vision for yourself and embody it. Just one spot. I'm not on social medias or anything like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I'm excited for our listener to apply some of these lessons in their life, to reveal more light in the world and go on their own hero's journey, or continue that if they're in the middle of it.
Well, thank you for
All right.
offering me the space to share, and to have that opening to speak about this stuff. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.